Welcome to Waypoint Real Talk, where we discuss real estate and your home. Let's get started with your hosts, Aaron Shishilla and Austin Hines.
Welcome to Waypoint Real Talk. My name is Aaron, and with us today we have...
My name is Austin, and with us we have Nick Parrinello, the broker-owner of Real Living Casa, Fina, Realty. Thanks for joining us today, Nick.
Thanks, Austin. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Of course. So let's talk about a few things here. This is your first podcast. Well, it's not really a podcast. It's a video.
You guys called it podcast.
We did call it a podcast.
We did, because that's what we thought it was going to be, but then it turned out it wasn't going to be a podcast. No.
You guys lied.
False advertising.
So we're going to talk today about home inspections and how you deal with that as a real estate agent, as a realtor.
Yes.
And also we're going to talk about how you're too cool for dancing at the intro.
You know I'd hear that.
So can you introduce to us how you got into real estate, your background, where you are now?
Sure.
What makes you so awesome?
So basically, real estate's been my only job out of school. So I went to university out in LA, didn't know what to do. I knew somebody doing real estate down here in Florida, so he said, why don't you come and give it a shot? I said, you know what? What's the worst thing that could happen? If I don't like it, I'll just do it for a couple of years and go find something else, and I'll know how to buy and sell houses. That was 2006. Flash forward to, now, and I've been doing this for over 14, 15 years now. And still enjoy it. Started off as an agent, didn't know, I knew 3 people in the whole state. One of the first people I met was actually Bob, Austin's dad, and he was still doing home inspections at the time himself. Met him in a business networking group. And we did some business together, and so we're still working together today. And it's been an interesting story. But anyway, I got involved with the company on a management level. I bought the company about 5.5 years ago. I've been the sole broker owner of it since then. We've grown from more of a boutique brokerage to about 55 agents right now, and we're on track for about 700 transactions this year, operating out of about 11 counties in all of Central Florida. We call our home in Tampa. The majority of our business is done in Tampa, Hillsborough, so Hillsborough, Pasco, Pinellas, and into Polk. But we have some agents in Orlando. We do coverage in, so Orange, Osceola. We go down to Sarasota occasionally. We go up north to Hernando, different areas. Our agents kind of work anywhere where the opportunity comes up, I guess you could say. I still enjoy it. I still do sell a little bit here and there with my people that I've always worked with. But my focus these last 3 or 4 years has really been on training, management, agents at the office, helping them grow their business. And I've enjoyed that aspect of it tremendously. So
Now, when we talked on the phone, like to bring you onto this podcast / video / not podcast.
/ whatever it is.
Whatever it is, Waypoint Real Talk. We discussed what made you successful as a broker, and you mentioned you didn't have any other. You didn't have any other job experience, or did you have other job experience?
I mean, I had an internship with Smith Barney at school. I had a financial background. I have business degrees and a Spanish degree from Pepperdine University. But really, no, I didn't have any corporate job which is funny because in real estate, this is not most people's first career.
Yeah.
Most people come in with, they had a sales job, they had a corporate job, they were a teacher, they were an insurance person. So they typically bring with them a skill set and a mindset from somewhere else, whereas I kind of came in raw and fresh, and here's real estate, here's what you do, and that's all I kind of know.
So what makes you so successful if you had to shorten it into a sentence?
Well, I would say I've been involved in management since I was a teenager. As a teenager, I was involved with sports camps. Every summer I would go to Boston. And very quickly, by the time I was 19 years old, I was basically running the sports camp. And so I was managing 20-something-year-old coaches and directing multiple sports. And so I've always had a management role. And I've always felt very comfortable managing people, working with people. I don't want to use the word leadership in a sense that it sounds like, I'm commanding over people. But in leadership, you have to take a proactive and strong role because people look for strong leadership when they come and work. And in real estate, everybody's running their own business. I've always been entrepreneurial. I came from an entrepreneurial family. So that was one of the reasons I didn't want to go into corporate. So that's definitely more than a sentence like you asked me to do. But I think I've always gravitated towards management of people, helping people grow, helping people realize and achieve what they're capable of.
Yeah.
And that's what really drives me and keeps me passionate about what I'm doing.
And I think that's what really fits your office. Because when we talked about it, and when I first met you, you were opening up your office in the new location. That's what everybody was there for, was to grow their own brand, be their own self, and have the tools and the knowledge that you bring to help get them to where they want to be.
Right.
So, and I think that's a great attribute to have.
Thank you.
But to talk about this podcast, this topic, we're talking about Bob's inspection reports when he wrote them for you. They're not clean. Our inspection reports, any inspection, some more than others, are not clean. What do you mean by that? How do you take apart a home inspection report?
So it's funny because when you deal with even new construction, and I know you guys, Austin, you actually came to our office and presented on why you should get a home inspection during new construction, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Even new construction has a laundry list. I've seen 40-page new construction reports before. Nothing is ever perfect. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of systems that go into a house, and you don't have skilled laborers doing everything. And so to that point, especially with resale and used homes, you have issues. So you always have to then take the buyer, manage their expectations, manage the realities of what they're dealing with, and help them, because some of them are first-time home buyers, some of them never bought a home before, don't know what to expect. And the value of a home inspection report isn't just in what's wrong with the house. It's in, I have the kind of things fall into 4 different categories when you're looking at an inspection report. And it's not all just about what's wrong with the house. First, you have informational stuff. So for example, what's the age of the air conditioning system? What's the estimated useful life on the roof? What's the electrical service coming into the house? What are the plumbing? What's the plumbing? What's the electrical? All that sort of stuff. It's informational. Seller disclosures are required in Florida, but a lot of homeowners don't know. And if they don't know, they can't tell you what type of systems are in the house. So it's very important to know what you're getting. Maintenance issues is another thing. And maintenance, homeownership and maintenance, I mean, it's an ongoing battle, right? You always have things you're supposed to be doing. And it's funny because you get your home inspection, it says you should be doing this, this, and this. And then I bought my house 6 years ago and I haven't recaulked my windows and, done all that stuff.
Shame on you.
Time for another inspection.
No.
Let me do it.
Yeah.
So there's maintenance things that as a homeowner, it's important to know and to understand how to take care of your air conditioning system, how to take care of your windows, your bathrooms, your caulking, your grouts, your paint outside, all that sort of stuff. Your next thing is the recommendations. And a lot of those may be cosmetic, but at the same token, there might be recommendations that you weren't aware of and that you think, maybe these do need to be addressed. That we'll come back to that topic later, but that's one of the ones where most often people get caught between what does the inspector say and what does the contract say. And the fourth thing is, of course, severe problems, things that need to be addressed immediately. Is there a mechanical failure? Is there a roof leak? Are things out that are fire hazards, safety hazard, electrical hazards? So those are kind of the 4 different categories. It's a lot. It's a lot for us sometimes. I get calls from my agents almost on a weekly basis. Hey, Nick, I'm having trouble with this inspection report. I need your help. So imagine as a homeowner or a buyer, how do you interpret that? So it's really important that a buyer is working with an experienced agent who can basically take this huge amount of data, digest it. A lot of times the buyers at the inspection will go to the inspector and say, okay, so what do I do now? And so it's not the inspector's job, right? It's the real estate agent's job to then say, okay, let's take this stuff, let's interpret it in light of the contract. If there are seller obligations, what are the seller obligations? And then translate that into what are our next steps? Are you canceling? Are you moving forward? No questions asked. Are you renegotiating terms? And again, we'll talk about that shortly, but that's our job. And that's where we come in and say, okay, we've got this. What do we do now?
Right. I like how you separate them into the 4 categories. They are the informational, the maintenance, and what are your other 2 that you had in there?
Recommendations and then severe problems.
Severe problems. I would say a majority of the issues that are on a home inspection report all stem from something with maintenance that has been missed.
Maintenance and recommendation, and it can go from one to the other. It can go from, oh, you didn't maintain this property properly over 3, 4, 5 years, which led to
Right.
water intrusion, which now you have a major problem.
Yeah.
Which, poor improper, sloping and drainage outside of, gutters not allowing, clogged gutters which allow water intrusion, or just no gutters that make the water come down, and stucco issues. If you don't properly
Right.
maintain caulking and paint, water intrusion. I mean, water's a problem. So yeah, they can transcend from one to the other if you're not careful. And the new homeowner needs to know, if it's maintenance, maybe it's not the seller's responsibility, but you should do it immediately so that it doesn't turn into a problem later on.
Okay. And how does a real estate agent, or like you, when you step in and you say, okay, well, I'm going to help you understand this information, the inspection report.
Yeah.
What steps do you take after the fact, after you separate the information? So we mentioned like as is contracts. What is the seller responsible for fixing, if anything?
No, it's a great question. And by the time we get to the inspection, most of my agents should have, and if they haven't, shame on them, they're supposed to have this conversation beforehand. So when we've got the inspection scheduled and you guys send out your nice email to the agents and here's your thing and here's your
Beautiful
date.
email.
Beautiful.
Love it.
I spent time on that.
We love that
Give
email.
myself props.
Sorry.
Amen to that. So they should already know beforehand a good amount of information. We like to empower our clients. We like to give them the better they are prepared for the information coming in. Hopefully, the less shock it is if something comes up unexpected. But it also depends on what contract you're on. And to speak to the as is, that is by far and away the most common contract we deal with in our area. But there are actually multiple contracts that we deal with. We are authorized as real estate agents to use 2 different fill-in-the-blank contracts. CRSP, Contract for Residential Sale and Purchase, CRSP 16. And the other one is the FAR BAR, the Florida Realtors and Florida Bar joint contract. CRSP is not heavily used. It's out there, it's available. It's mainly the FAR BAR. And the FAR BAR comes in 2 flavors. The FAR BAR 5X, which has repair limits and obligations for the seller, and the As Is, which is the most commonly used one, which basically does not obligate the seller to any repairs, but it still gives a as is with inspection period, where they're saying the seller's not agreeing to make repairs, but you have the right to inspect and you have the right to cancel should you be unhappy with the inspection report. The repair limits gets very complicated, and that's one of the reasons why I think most agents shy away from it, because it's like you have to do a tango with the homeowner. So you get your inspection. It has to be, first of all, it has to be done by a licensed inspector. You get there's different buckets, as I call them, repair limits. It's your general repair limits, your WDO or wood destroying organism repair limits, and your permit repair limits. There's a whole separate one for open and expired permits. Once you do that, then you have 10 days to provide your list to the seller. And then you have to give that to them during the inspection period. And then the seller has 10 days to respond. And they get quotes and they get estimates. And if it falls into the repair limits, they're obligated to do the repairs. If it goes above, you have to negotiate this. And then you have 10 days to review that. It's like, and meanwhile,
it's a lot more work.
Stuff is supposed to be going on. You're supposed to be getting appraisals and surveys. And it's like you're stuck in limbo negotiating these items. And there's a whole page dedicated to what is a seller responsibility, structural warranted items. It should be in working condition. It doesn't include cosmetic items, aesthetic imperfections, blah, blah, blah. It's like, whoa, there's just so much stuff. Whereas with the as is, you have your inspection period. You do whatever inspections you deem necessary, whether or not you hire a professional inspection. We always have somebody hire them, but some people, if it's an investor and they just want to get a contractor through. But by far and away, everybody pretty much gets professional inspections. And then you basically interpret that data and you have the ability to cancel. No questions asked. It literally says it's the buyer's, it's a unilateral right to cancel. The buyer's sole discretion is what the contract says. So literally, buyer can cancel because they don't like the color of the paint. You don't even need to give a reason. And that's, why it's just easier, because during that period, they can cancel for any reason whatsoever.
Do you think there's a problem with that?
It's funny because some listing agents will say, I don't like using that because it gives the buyers too easy of a way to walk. I'll tell you, I worked with an attorney one time and we talked about which contract to use. And he said, you know what? He's an attorney. He knows all the stuff about the contracts. He said, you know what? If a buyer wants to get out, just let them get out. Because if they don't get out during that period, they're going to try to wiggle their way out somewhere else. And meanwhile, we have to have the property off the market. So his philosophy, which I was like, well, that's interesting, because I did not think he would be okay with that. He said, you know what? If they want to get out, they'll find a way to get out, or they'll try to get out through other means, through the appraisal, loan period, et cetera. You said, give them their 10 days, they either want it or they don't, and let's go forward.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two philosophies on that. I don't know there's a right answer, but there's a couple different philosophies.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, with wording or whatever, you can probably get away with anything. Right?
But then, so with the as is, the reason why it's also easier is because it's almost never as is. Like the contract says this, but we're actually shocked sometimes when a buyer doesn't ask for things.
Right.
It's almost just normal. Okay, you did your inspection. What are you asking for? It's just,
right.
it's almost a given, which leads you to, is it being done in good faith or is it being done in bad faith? And unfortunately, you get both sides. And just to kind of touch on that, good faith, bad faith, you get your seller disclosures up front. Sometimes the sellers know a lot about the property. Sometimes they don't. They may tell you it's an 18-year-old roof. They may tell you it's a 16-year-old air conditioning system. So knowing what you know, you make an offer with the information on hand, pricing, valuing based on what you know. Let's say I know it's a 16-year-old AC. That's it's beyond the expected life of an air conditioning system in Florida. And so you make the offer knowing in the back of your mind, you probably are going to need to budget $4,000 or $5,000 for an air conditioning system. You then do your inspections. It's working just fine. It's blowing within industry guidelines, the temperature differential, all that sort of stuff. But then you say, I want you to replace the AC. To me, that's bad faith because you knew the condition and yet you're trying to capitalize on that opportunity.
Yeah.
It happens. It unfortunately happens, and you just deal with it. The seller has the right to say no, buy it or don't. But the buyer has the right to ask for anything they want. Their protection, their leverage is they have the ability to cancel and get their money back. So that's where the bad faith comes in. The good faith stuff comes in where you get your disclosures, everything looks good, you make your offer, and then you find out there's termites and the seller didn't know about it. And that's possible. So, but let's say it's going to cost you $2,500 to tent it and fumigate and all that sort of stuff. That's a good faith thing that I feel like then it's justifiable coming to the seller and saying, hey, listen, I bought this house and I'm willing to pay you X based on my assumptions at the time. We then found out there's a major problem that needs to be addressed. I don't think it's worth what I was offering to pay you. Mm-hmm. So let's work something out. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens the majority of time is you don't nickel and dime things, but you hopefully deal with the meat and potatoes of what's really important.
Right. How do you deal with, because obviously there could be loan restrictions, mm-hmm. but then also insurance restrictions, specifically, I know this will be a fun topic with you, 4 points.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So that kind of opens, so the next step of all of that, and again, why you really need the guidance and the expertise of somebody who's been through this before, is, okay, so now you've got, an inspection which has problems. What do you do? And let's say you still have a buyer who wants to buy the house.
What problems are we talking about? So what classifies a problem? Is it an old AC? Is an AC not working?
Well, it's something that a buyer sees as an obstacle to them buying the house. They still want the house, but they want it to be addressed. Okay. And so again, sometimes unfortunately our buyers ask for bad faith things. We have to do as they request. But if it's something that they want addressed, we have to figure out a way to get people past the next step. And so mm-hmm. we kind of have little checkpoints through the contract. We have the first checkpoint is typically the inspections. Most people do inspections before they do appraisals and things because so many deals fall apart due to inspections, right? Mm-hmm. Once you clear the inspections, we still have the appraisal. We still have the loan that has to be approved. So there's these little checkpoints. And each checkpoint, there's an opportunity for either the deal to fall apart or for the parties to renegotiate. Mm-hmm. Appraisal, a lot of times you have to renegotiate down because the appraisal came in too low. Loans don't usually renegotiate terms, but you either move forward or you can't. So mm-hmm. These little checkpoints. So the inspection checkpoint, some buyers are okay, fairly easygoing. Mm-hmm. Other ones are literally like, if they don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm canceling and I'm going to go find another house. So it's really a situational thing. You can't say, what is common ones again are AC, big ticket items, AC, structural, termites, roof. Those are the biggest deal killers, or I guess what you would call like problematic things that we have to negotiate. But sometimes it's just a laundry list of moderate things, electrical things, plumbing things. Sometimes it's insurance related, like you said, because so to talk about that, and you guys are probably more qualified to talk about the 4 points than I am, but 4 point, just to define that, is an inspection that certain insurance companies require depending on the age and the condition of the home. which examines the 4 major systems of the home: the HVAC, the electrical, the plumbing, and the roof. That's what the insurance company is most caring about, because I'm assuming that's because so many insurance claims and problems can come from those systems. With the 4 points, you pass or you fail. And when you fail, you have certain elements of the house which are not up to current standards. And they may not even be in bad condition, but electrical standards change over time, plumbing standards change. Polybutylene pipes, at the time they didn't realize it was a problem. Now they see it's a problem. Age of cast iron and galvanized, knob and tube wiring, even like electrical panels, like certain brands. When I bought my house, I think it was Challenger. It was one of those uninsurable brands. And we decided, okay, we better replace this thing, because even if it doesn't burn our house down, it's a problem. It's clearly a problem. So these can be things that in the home inspection aren't necessarily an issue, but it's called out on the separate 4-point form, and that's what you turn into your insurance person. If it's a 4-point problem, you usually have more leverage to negotiate, because you can go to them and say, well, anybody needing insurance, anybody getting a loan is going to have this problem. You really need to address this. And if you don't address it for us, you're going to address it for somebody else. So those are easier. If it's on a 4-point, it kind of gives it more clout when we ask them to address the items. But it can be very difficult to overcome sometimes, because a lot of those need to be done before closing. And then you run into the issue of, does the seller have $10,000 laying around to replumb the house? Do they have $15,000 to replace the roof before closing? And that's where it gets a little bit more complicated when we talk about some of our biggest hurdles is, okay, so now we have, in theory, the buyer still wants to buy the house, the seller still wants to sell the house. We know what we have to deal with. We just don't know how to solve it to get from A to Z, to comply with the loan, to comply with the insurance, to comply with people's financial constraints. Maybe the buyer doesn't have the cash to do the repairs. Maybe the seller doesn't. It's tied up into the house. So it gets pretty complicated in some of those instances. It really does.
Okay, we're back, everybody. And you just got a huge compliment from our audience. We have an in-house audience this time.
You guys are getting big time.
We are getting big time.
Did you buy a ticket? How much was it? I didn't see any of that, so.
We have a special guest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, VIP.
Yes.
Yeah. Usually they're on sale a few $100.
Eventbrite.
Yeah, you can get one next time if you want to come in. I think Crystal Brady is going to come on next time. So, all right. So back into what we were talking about.
Yeah.
We're discussing, what would you do if you run into a situation to where you have to clear some type of hurdle between the seller and the buyer? Maybe there's something on the 4-point, the roof's leaking.
Right.
Maybe there's a mortgage issue where they can't clear the loan.
Right.
What do you do?
So when you're negotiating, I don't know, at the end of the day, you have to let your buyer and your seller, depending on which side of the transaction you're working on, keep in mind what's fair to both parties. And obviously you want the best possible scenario for your client or your customer, but they also have to understand, what's fair in this transaction. So when I bring that up, for example, remaining useful life. Let's say we talk about the roof. Let's say it's an 18-year-old shingle roof. You could get an extra 5 years out of it, but most likely you're going to find very few home inspectors or insurance people who are like, yeah, I feel great about this 18-year-old roof. You got 10 more years left.
Yes.
Sure. Even though people buy, the 30-year shingles, and they get misled by the warranties on the shingles because it's not necessarily so. You got it disclosed up front. You knew it was an 18-year-old roof. You knew you were budgeting for a replacement. Now you come in with a 4-point, and now the 4-point says you need to replace the roof in order to get your insurance, and that can come up, even if it's not leaking today. Okay, so what's fair as a buyer? You need a new roof, right? Best case scenario, the seller pays for a new roof. Boom, you're done. Is that fair to the seller, though?
Well, I mean, I guess if it depends on the price of the house, right? Because then the price of the house would go up.
Exactly, because let's say it's a $15,000 roof. When you made your offer and you negotiated the offer, everybody knew it was an 18-year roof. Now all of a sudden you have a brand new roof on your house that does add a significant value to the house. And most likely, most people don't own their houses for 15 years. So most likely that new buyer will never have to pay for a roof for the period of time that they own the house. So is that really fair to the seller to now give you a brand new roof at their expense?
Yes. No, I'm kidding.
Not when you're the buyer. So in that case, we will try to temper the expectations of the buyer to say, yes, we're going to need to address this roof, but is it really fair for the seller to just buy you a brand new roof and you still get the price? So at that point, you look at, okay, what's reasonable? So you've got your estimated remaining useful life. You've got, okay, You were planning on spending money in the first couple of years. Okay, so maybe we can split it, and maybe even 50-50 is not fair. Maybe it needs to be 75-25. Maybe it needs to be, okay, it's a $15,000 roof. You chip in 3, they chip in 12. Like, there's all sorts of different things. It's situational, but that's to say each scenario requires a different solution, so to speak. That's one way to kind of figure those things out.
Can you increase the price of the house?
You can.
If the seller like, say for instance, a buyer doesn't have any money, and the seller's like, well, I got tons of money, like, I'll just slap on a new roof. And
Well, we actually have, and excuse me, it may sound funny to say that, but we actually have, and you have to be careful though, because usually, again, the inspections are done prior to the appraisal, right? We've done that before. I can actually, just recently, maybe 2 months ago, we did this before. One of my agents did this, where they did that. They negotiated the new roof. It was going to be done prior to closing. So at the time of the appraisal, it wasn't done yet, but we made sure that they saw the addendum that said, because they're going to see the purchase price gets raised. They're going to say, hey, what the heck, who brings the price up? But then they're going to see the addendum that says it's going to have a brand new roof. So they need to factor that into their appraisal.
Gotcha.
And they will. They'll give you, they're not going to give you dollar for dollar, but if it's a $15,000 roof, hey, maybe they'll give you 8, maybe they'll give you 10, and that'll help get you to where you need to be. Because if you don't, then it's going to affect the buyer's need to bring extra cash to the closing. So sometimes the price can go up. Sometimes you can offer concessions, so closing cost concessions. A seller can pay X amount of dollars towards closing costs to offset the cash need for paying for closing costs, because it's all about lowering the price may seem like the easiest answer, but it doesn't always help the buyer, because the buyer has an actual cash expense they're going to be incurring. Lowering the price is great, but it only lowers their mortgage by a little bit, and they still have to bring all this money to closing. A lot of buyers either don't have extra cash laying around, or they don't want to. They don't want to invest 10 grand in it, even if the price comes down $10,000. So although that's the easiest solution, it's very rarely the solution that everybody's okay with. And you also run into limitations, because if you've already got closing costs negotiated into your price, you can't just throw on unlimited closing costs. Usually it's around 3%, depending on the type of loan. If it's VA or FHA, you might be able to get more. But after 3%, you run the risk of not being able to use that money at closing. And so therefore you're leaving money on the table, quite literally. And it doesn't benefit the buyer either. So you run into issues where, oh, I've already got closing costs being paid by seller, so I can't get more there. Lowering the price doesn't help me. So then it's like, okay, well, now what? We've got a buyer who wants to move forward with a new roof. We've got a seller who wants to somehow provide that for them. And so how do we get forward with that? So tell me, Aaron, how do we get forward with that?
Honestly, I don't know.
So there are still a couple more tricks up our sleeve. Occasionally a contractor will be willing to do the work, knowing that, for example, the roof, we keep talking about the roof. We have done instances, actually there was a VA loan one time where it needed a new roof. We got the contractor. It only takes 2 to 3 days to do a roof. You have to schedule it in advance, weather permitting. A roofer can knock it out in a couple of days. So like a couple of days before closing, they replaced the roof, and then the contractor knew and agreed that at closing they would be paid directly from the seller. Not every contractor is willing to do that, because there are risks. What happens if the property falls through? What happens if the closing doesn't happen? Are they going to get paid? Their work's been done. So not a lot of contractors won't do that. But if they're willing to do that, that's one way. Get the work done right before closing, get it re-inspected or reappraised, and then move forward with the closing.
I'm sure you have fun with those re-inspections.
It's, with the roof, as long as the permit's closed out, and you've that's not that difficult. Other re-inspections can be difficult if there's a lot of stuff, and especially like electrical behind the walls, under the crawl space, things like that. But the roof's pretty straightforward, actually. The last thing, if the lender's okay with it, there's something called an escrow holdback. And I don't know if you guys have heard that term before. That involves, we don't like anything that involves liability beyond the closing, and unfortunately, escrow holdbacks require involvement of the agents, involvements of the parties, involvement of the title company, and of course, therefore, liability post-closing. Escrow holdback needs to be disclosed on the closing statement, so the lender needs to know about it, which they have to sign off on everything. But if they're okay with it, and if everybody's okay with it, basically, money is held by the title company in escrow from the seller proceeds, a predetermined amount based on estimates or invoices to pay for the work. So you have a roof needs to be done. Let's say you are able to move forward. Some insurance policies are written so that you have 30 days or some odd number of days to do the thing that is deficient. So let's say you get a policy that says you have 30 days to replace the roof. You can replace it immediately after closing. Seller proceeds get set aside. The title company has an escrow agreement. Everybody signs that says, here's the purpose of this money. We're going to hold it in escrow. We're going to make payment to the vendor. Any surplus will be refunded to the seller. Any shortage, the seller would be responsible. And in theory, it all works out because the roofer then does their work. The money gets paid. Everybody moves on. Mm-hmm. Problems can come up if there's, budget problems where like they start doing the roof and there's more work entailed and more money owed. The buyer at this point owns the property. So it's their property that would potentially be liened for unpaid contractor work. It's their property should the seller just disappear. That's why the money's held in escrow because, good luck chasing them for the money, but the money's there. But if more money is required, there's a risk. So there's a risk for the buyer in doing that, but sometimes it's the only alternative.
Those kinds of alternatives are pretty rare though, right? Would you say?
They're pretty rare. Mm-hmm. That's almost a last resort because again, it extends obligations of the contract post-closing. Gotcha. And we definitely don't like to do that. But if it happens, I can definitely remember times it's happened. Mm-hmm. And that just means that we as an agent now have additional obligations post-closing to make sure that the work gets done, the permits get closed, the information goes to the title company, payments get out dispersed, like everything gets wrapped up. Mm-hmm. But it does happen. So yeah, these are like last resort extreme things. Most issues can be worked out during the contract time period.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mentioned to you this on the break, and wrapping back from where we started, we talked about, the maintenance issues with the house, it being informative, recommended issues, and serious issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of times with as-is contracts, it could be issues with a really common contingency is the home inspection. Would you say that's the most common contingency is like home inspection or like insurance issues?
Probably, yeah, because even with cash, you very rarely see somebody waive inspections completely. People will waive appraisals if it's cash. People will obviously waive lender approval if it's cash. But even cash, people usually have an inspection. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the most common.
What would you say your like biggest recommendation or what you would like to see out of like the home inspection industry or even to just other home inspectors that you would like to see to help you do your job better?
I bet most agents could tell you what we as an industry see and deal with on a regular basis. And actually, that's quite honestly probably why you guys get so much repeat business from the agents you work with is because there are the inspection companies that we work with or the inspectors that we work with can come in a whole variety of come across the spectrum of not detailed enough, inexperienced, because we don't want an inspector to miss things, of course. But on the other hand, I don't even want to say too detailed because we want a detailed report, but I would almost call it like an alarmist. Like there are companies out there that are alarmist inspection companies and will freak people out unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. Same thing with mold inspection companies, with WDO inspections. A lot of the WDO guys out there, if they find any evidence of anything, even if it's 20 years old, we recommend tenting, we recommend, subs, we recommend this, freaks people out. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you that most real estate agents do not want to maintain a relationship with either a company that doesn't do a good job, a 3-page report, no pictures, whatever it is. Or on the other extreme, they're detailed and that's great, but then they make a mountain out of a molehill. Right. And they don't educate, which is, what I think you guys do a lot of good things is you educate people in, cracks, for example. Very common in Florida, settlement cracks. Builders don't allow the slabs to settle enough. You've got, sand and limestone and stuff like that. There's all sorts of different things. Doesn't mean sinkhole. Doesn't mean, major settlement problems. It's very common. But that's something that some people freak out about. And like, oh my God, there's cracks in my driveway. There's a crack. I've got a crack across, some tiles in my kitchen. It's been like that forever.
Time for a home inspection.
Structural crack. That's structural. Is it greater than eighth of an
right? Can you stick the credit card in there, like all that stuff? But they can get blown out of proportion, and quite honestly, they can cause people to back out of a deal that otherwise is a good house, just with reasonable, normal things to expect. A lot of times, what I'll ask an inspector to do is, especially if you're dealing with an older home, like for example in South Tampa, we do sales down there, and a lot of them are 80, 90, 100-year-old wood frame homes on piers and crawl spaces. So
every single one has termites.
If they don't have it now, they had it multiple times. They probably have it now. It's just
piers are messed up.
The piers are messed up. The structural beams have issues. the floors are not even. Like there's all sorts of things. I'll try to ask the inspector on a scale of 1 to 10 for the type of house you're dealing with. How do you rate this inspection? And a lot of times they'll say an 8, but the home buyer who doesn't deal with this on a regular basis might be like, it's a 3 or a 4 because they see 60 pages and this and that and the recommendations. And then the home inspector says, no, it's like an 8. It's actually better than average. And so I think the disconnect of this is a big investment. Am I in over my head? Oh my God, there's 30 things on here I need to do. And the reality is they don't end up needing to do them or do them all. So you need that inspector to be able to give that dose of reality of, hey, I do this every day for a living. This is not an uncommon report. And you just need to figure out, are you comfortable with that on a personal level? We're not going to push somebody if they're not comfortable buying the house. But at the same token, is this a knee-jerk reaction? And are you going to later regret not buying this house? Or are you just not going to find another house and think back, oh man, I should have bought that house. So that's probably what we would say. If you talk to most real estate agents, that's probably
what we hear.
Biggest thing.
Nick is the spokesman for the real estate agents.
Yeah.
We hear your voice, Nick.
Yes. We hear your voice. This we'll post this on Florida Inspectors. It's a Facebook group page. So I'll post it on there and I'll announce it for everybody and say Nick is the voice for all real estate.
Tag your
agents.
business page on there, your phone number, your email,
So we're going to get
your address.
flooding.
No, let's not do that. Let's not. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming out here to talk. It's
been
very,
fun.
very informative.
Thank you.
Wealth of knowledge. All right.
Been doing this for a while. Been seeing a lot of things, and I don't know, like I enjoy it. I really do. I enjoy it. I enjoy being involved. I enjoy seeing the end results. You know, the vast majority of people are super thrilled and happy, and we just like being involved in one of the biggest steps in a person's, personal and financial life.
I can definitely help you take great pride in being able to help your agents and being able to help all the people purchasing house and help them through that process, especially educate them about the process and what's important, what's not, and how to get through it. So anyway, I greatly appreciate you coming on.
Thank you guys.
Really great podcast, really great video. Perfect dance at the beginning. Loved it.
You set the bar, man. Everyone else that comes on, they're gonna have to go straight.
That's funny.
We had a mortgage lender on here, and he was like doing this and like wanted us to do it with us.
What's that?
This
It was a dance from a show.
Yeah.
Like everybody does this in sync.
We have outro music too.
You do have outro music?
Yeah. I mean, I play it over, so we can.
Usually there's no video to it, I think, but you could.
No, because I know you guys have the video. Whether or not you use it, it's up to you.
Smart man. Smart man. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in.
you.
Be
Thank
sure if
you.
you have any comments, drop it below. We'll leave Nick's information there so that way you can find him online.
Beautiful.
And awesome. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks, guys.